うとしているのですか。
見ないでください。俺はこんな姿をあなたに見られたくない。
どんな力を持っていてもフェイはフェイです。だから自分から死のうとなんてしないで。
Previously, he had been a filthy peasant boy who was picked on by everyone in the kingdom until one day, when he realized the true power of his skill. With it being one of the 7 mortal sins, he has the ability to increase his stats, something nobody else is able to do. Although this is a powerful skill, it comes at the cost of bringing him on the brink of going berserk, making his daily life a struggle to stay sane. Episode 7. On his way to meet up with his crush Roxy, our protagonist Fate travels alongside Mine, another wielder of a deadly sin, with her skill having the ability to shift her weapon into any sort of weight. When she is unable to control herself, she ends up tipping the entire carriage over. Because of this, they are forced to stop with her power destroying the back wheel. Upon exploring, they find a peasant village that is surprisingly peaceful despite it being so close to Gallia. Once he enters Greed, his mortal sin sword explains to him there must be someone powerful guarding the area to keep it safe. He wanders around and eventually stumbles upon a man who claims to be the chief. He asks Fate what business he has here, wondering how he has stats over 2 million despite only being level 1. This reveals that the old man has the Identify skill as well as a holy sword, making him surely someone of importance. He sees Fate as a threat, thinking his powers are unexplainable. The old man then whips out his sword, and the two begin dueling it out. Despite his attacks, he gets every strike blocked, forcing him to drop his weapon. After doing this, the old man tells him he is welcome to stay, but on one condition. He informs Fate that if he wants to stay, then he needs to train under him. He informs Fate that he knows he has lots of more skills, but has no way of using them correctly. Because of all this, he tells Fate he wants to train him in order to properly make use of his abilities. With all of this being said, Fate accepts his request, and introduces himself to the man who explains that he is Aaron. While they talk, Mine emerges from the back, causing him to become stunned by how strong she is. He informs Fate she is a capable warrior. The two then head into a cabin to sleep for the night. The following morning, when waking up, Aaron immediately asks Fate to train under him, staying with hand-to-hand combat. Because Fate has no experience in this, he starts off like a novice fighter. Thanks to Aaron's guidance, however, he soon realizes how important it is to know how to fight without a weapon. He begins training under him for each day until Fate eventually begins to get affected by his gluttony skill. This allows him to get hungry, but at the same time move much better, causing Aaron to step it up a notch. That night, after a full day of training, he informs Fate they will have full combat training the next day. Fate thinks everything is all right, but he soon hears Aaron shouting out in anger. When he inspects what's going on, he finds Mine sitting around with all of the food eaten. Before we continue, let's take a moment to answer the question of the day. What is your favorite new-gen anime? Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out in the next video. Now back to the recap. This causes Aaron to go and get some more food, but when he does, he stops to look at the castle. He remembers his past life when he used to live within the castle, wishing everything was as it was in the past. As this happens, Fate enters the castle with hopes of finding a monster, but he ends up finding an old painting of Aaron with his kid. He decides to head back that night after finding no monsters, where he begins his training under Aaron again. This time, Aaron presents him with a stick as his weapon. Despite Aaron striking him full power, he is able to deflect the attack with ease. Mine then approaches and tells him she will reward him, drawing some stupid thing on his face. After these events, they eat dinner to prepare for the next day. As they eat, Mine reveals that everything tastes the same to her, so she needs to get going, having a job to do. Upon hearing that, Aaron looks at the castle and reveals that it used to be his castle. 15 years ago, there was a monster outbreak, so he had to leave his kingdom to deal with it. During this time, his entire village and castle was overpowered by a crowned beast, one of the strongest monsters. Ever since then, the castle has belonged to a death lich, making him unable to do anything about it. After hearing this, Fate's gluttony skill begins to ache inside of him, so he prepares to venture into the castle. Aaron notices this and offers to join him as well, offering to enter the castle alongside him. At first glance, it seems as if they are completely normal, with all the lights and music going. Despite this, Fate continues exploring into the castle, taking out every monster in their path. They eventually make it inside and find an invitation to enter the second room. When they enter it, Eren finds all of his family welcoming him home as if nothing ever happened. His son and wife thank him for coming home, causing him to be brought to tears. He asks them how they were alive, but they act as if he never left. Eren becomes comforted by their emergence, so Fate asks Greed what's going on. Greed explains that this is all an illusion, and they are all dead. Meanwhile, Eren whips out something from his pocket to present as a souvenir, but as he does, his son strikes him. He tells Eren that he had to protect this castle for all the time he was gone, claiming he abandoned them. The empty shells tell him that they are still alive, but he knows that this is all just a facade. Fate proposes for him to slice through the bodies, having a scythe possible of cutting anything in half. Despite hearing this, Eren asks for him to let him take care of his family, ordering Fate to take on the crowned beast. He accepts this request and ventures further into the castle, eventually stumbling upon the Lich Lord. With a huge and mighty appearance, Fate realizes that this monster is on par if not stronger than himself. Thanks to Eren's training, however, he is able to hold his own and not falter in the heat of battle. Eventually, Eren emerges as well, telling Fate he is here to support him. Eren begins by using a skill called Grand Cross, thus eliminating all of the lower-level skeletons. As he uses this skill, Fate wonders what to do, eventually grabbing the other sword Eren has. He tells him he will assist him in this battle using a combo skill alongside him. Because of its power, the Lich Lord stands no chance, thus getting vanquished from the castle. Eren then decides to hold a funeral for his family, wishing them off for the final time. Thanks to this, he is able to move forward and get back to his past happy self. As he does this, the eye from the Lich Lord attempts to escape, but it is stopped with ease by Fate. Because of how strong it was, it eases his hunger, thus allowing Eren to enjoy the moment a bit longer. After they finish up here, they head back to the village where they find Mine expecting money for protecting the village. Eren accepts this request without a second thought and asks Mine if she is the girl from 50 years ago. He reveals that she came here a long time ago, yet her appearance hasn't changed in one bit. She claims that she is a phantom without the ability to die, informing them she lives to rebuild her village. Once all of this is done, Eren notices that Fate has reverted back to normal, so he reveals the true reason. After hearing this, Eren wishes him off without judging him at all, asking him to return back one day. Meanwhile, two of the Vlerick siblings talk about their Philosopher's Stone until they learn of their brother's death. With Corpse killing him, they become enraged, not knowing the man behind the mask is actually Fate. Episode 8. Following these events, Fate and Mine get back on the road where she decides to feed him like a child. After he eats the jerky, she pets him gracefully, then proceeds to fall asleep on his lap. He asks what she is doing, to which she explains the ground is too hard to sleep on. He tries to protect, but she falls asleep before he is able, causing him to wonder more about her. As they travel, Roxy's army is seen right behind them, soon to arrive at the very place they just left. Eventually, they do arrive at the land where Roxy recalls that Eren must live here. Although she knows he used to live in the castle, she informs her companions that now a Lich Lord is said to live in the castle. Although she is hesitant to approach, she is eventually welcomed inside by Eren. They ask how he has been doing, bowing down in the process, thus revealing he is the head of the Barbatos family, one of the 5 great families in the kingdom. He immediately notices Roxy informing her he was the one who named her. With him being good friends with her parents, she is stunned to learn that he holds her in high regards. Eren informs them that he did indeed retire, but recently he was able to dispose of the Lich Lord. He tells her that he wasn't alone in this manner, having gotten help by someone powerful. The others ask where he is, but Eren explains that he already left, along with asking him not to share his name, as his last wish, leaving Roxy to question who it could have been. She then heads out and prepares to head towards Gallia, but she is stopped by Eren. He asks if the Vlerick sent her, knowing their corruption is still prominent amongst the knights. He claims that they have always tried to hurt his and their families, telling her as long as she has her father as a teacher, she will be all right. This causes her to inform him that her father recently passed, thus being the reason why she is marching towards Gallia. Upon hearing this, he offers to teach her like he did with Fate, giving her all of the skills he has gained over the years. While this happens, Fate complains about walking so far, having arrived at an abandoned area. She informs him that this is where she was born, but she has no memories of this place. This makes him realize she is at least 4,000 years old. As they explore, they stumble upon a huge cocoon, causing Greed to reveal it's a chimera, with it being the strongest monster, using various vessels of different monsters. If it woke up, it could cause a calamity. He decides to inspect it out before fighting it, but gets an error revealing its higher level than he can even process. Mind tells him that she is going to awaken it, so she needs his help in order to defeat it. Because she has no ability to take away one's soul, she can't kill it because of how large it is, meaning she needs his help. Without going over a plan or anything, she strikes the egg, thus awakening the chimera before them. With a mighty appearance and a babe in the middle, he questions what is going on. With her having the same red eyes as he does, he gets intimidated but ultimately moves forward. Mind explains that he needs to strike the girl in the center with his scythe in order to take apart its soul. He hesitates at first but knows if he doesn't take it out, then nobody will. Before he can change options, the chimera strikes at him, thus forcing them on the retreat. During this moment, Mind decides to display her skills, knocking the attack back. She then attacks the chimera's arm, thus taking it off. During this moment, Fate shoots a petrifying arrow at its leg, making him think he is surely going to do good. As he does, however, the chimera regenerates instantly, making him wonder how he is supposed to defeat it. While he hesitates to fight, Mind makes quick work with the chimera taking off its arm yet again. This makes it even more enraged, eventually causing the chimera to evolve to counter their attacks. It enters a new form, causing Mind to order him to stand back while she deals with it. This causes Fate to feel like a failure, so he decides that he's going to awaken as well in order to counter the monster. He holds his eye like a weirdo, and ultimately enters his half-hunger phase, allowing him to get a massive power boost. After doing so, he declares that he will deal with it, running towards the chimera. He starts by petrifying it, but before he can strike again, the chimera encases itself with a magic sphere. To counter this, he switches to his scythe, but it proves ineffective against the shield. After doing this, Greed tells him to try again, but at the core of the barrier, allowing him to shatter it. Once he does this, he sees the girl scream and gets scared, pushing back. While he is distracted, the chimera begins flying away in pain. With this being done, Mind decides to send him flying in the air, allowing him to catch up to it. As he flies through the air, he switches his weapon into a new form and uses an ultimate skill. While he tries this, the chimera starts to self-destruct, causing him to send in his strongest attack. In turn, this eliminates the chimera and allows him to see the girl's memory of before she became a chimera. With her being raised in a lab by scientists since birth, she was determined to be an experiment. As he watches, he sees the girl being singled out and comforted by Mind. He wonders what this means, feeling a tightness within his chest. After doing so, Greed informs him that he just ate one of his own kind, revealing she was one of the mortal sins. He then spots Mind standing above a grave of hers, making him ask if she knew her. Mind shows no emotion, but rather states the obvious, telling him if there is a chimera, then it needs to be killed. With this being said, Fate asks Mind to kill him if he ever loses control of his own power. When he says this, she walks over to him and gives him a huge, promising to kill him if that ever happens in the process. Now with this done, he plans on heading towards the border town to help Roxy, while Mind explains she will stay here to rebuild her kingdom. After a bit of traveling, he arrives at the city of Babylon, a city on the border of Gallia. Once he enters the city, he notices everything is super expensive, causing him to wonder what's going on. He then notices a holy knight announcing a new lord in town, showing Roxy behind him. As he watches her, he notices another presence behind him, diverting his attention. Episode 9. Later that week, Fate notices tons of warriors and knights gathering in Babylon with hopes of joining the raid under Roxy. Although most people wouldn't like this kind of thing for Fate, it is the perfect chance to consume more stats and gain more skills. After some time, the leader of the Babylon town greets Roxy, welcoming her inside of his village. He tells her that it was a pain to see her father die, having been present when he passed away. He apologizes for not protecting him to his fullest, but Roxy shows no animosity. She tells him that they should move forward from the past and focus on the future. As this happens, he gives Roxy's lustful eyes a moment between the two. With this out of the way, Roxy decides it's about time to explore the town. As she looks around, Greed stops him, suddenly asking him to buy a scabbard nearby. He checks it out and is instantly noticed by the shopkeeper. He inspects his goods and notices that he has various damages on his gear from monsters. Greed tells him to trust this clerk and ask him for some new armor. With this being said, he asks the owner to make him a holder for his sword, so he presents Greed to him. Immediately, the owner talks about how nice the sword is, explaining it would be hard to make a holder for it. He informs him that it'll cost about 500 gold coins, but this is way out of Fate budget. He runs out, knowing it's a scam, wondering what to do. He eventually arrives at the border between Gallia and Babylon, so he crosses it. Immediately, he is met with a poison in the air, making him realize just how ruined Gallia is. As he explores, he notices a group of around 50 orcs chasing towards him. He decides to take them on by himself, running towards them. As he does, the other warriors take the initiative and fight as well, causing him to stop. This angers Greed, so he demands that he chase after them. As he assesses the situation, he notices another group of orcs chasing the warriors from behind. He decides to take on these monsters instead, thus not stealing the warriors' kills while getting some kills himself. The orcs quickly notice this, so they attempt to strike him, but it is instantly blocked by his new shield. Fate questions why it is so big, but soon realizes it's more than just a shield. With it protecting every incoming attack and tearing every monster in front of him to pieces, he realizes just how strong it is. As the battle goes on, Fate eventually finishes all of the monsters before him. He decides to collect the loot and present it to the guild, stunning everyone. They wonder how someone could gain so many orc ears, thinking he must have had a party with him. The warrior before him then approaches and claims he stole their loot, but Fate doesn't accept this. The warrior of course protests, but he gets made quick work of by Fate. This causes more and more warriors to approach him, but they all meet the same fate. He is able to gain his reward. After doing so, Roxy enters the build and asks him if he is the one responsible for all of this. He becomes stunned by her emergence and freezes, eventually explaining the situation. She takes his side and they round up the warriors. Now, with all of this done, they ask for his name, to which he explains he is Corpse. He walks away defeated until he eventually is stopped by the shopkeeper. He tells Fate he heard the news of him taking on all the thugs in the guild, asking him to use his goods again. He introduces himself as Jade and informs him he has been open for 3 months now but gets no customers. Because of this, he wants to give Fate a full set of armor for free with hopes that he will help him promote his business. Because this is exactly what Fate needs, he accepts the request and ends up getting a full set of armor. At the end of this, despite saying it will be free, he asks for 80 gold coins. Fate asks what he is talking about, reminding him he said it was free, so he lowers it to 40 gold coins. He ends up paying for this and wanders around town to hopefully spend some more money. As he explores, he notices a bar with tons of men outside. When he enters, he finds a blue-haired beauty winning over the heart of everyone that looks at her. Included in this is Fate, who stares at her and instantly realizes she is the mortal sin of lust. She tells him she has been waiting for him, making him stunned by how she knows all of this. She introduces herself as Eris, the sin of lust, and asks him to take off his mask. The two then sit down and share a drink, talking about their travels. Eris tells him that she knows him because she has been watching him ever since his gluttony skill awakened. She also knows about his sword, Greed, explaining she knows some things but not much about mine. With her being a first-generation sin, she doesn't get along well with her. As she talks, he notices her massive rack, causing him to reconsider being hostile towards her. She finally gets down to business, explaining the real reason she is here. She explains that she is the guardian of the kingdom, informing him she manages all of the kingdom's relationships. Thanks to her lust skill, she is able to entice every noble into helping them advance. The only issue with this is Roxy. Being a girl, she informs Fate that she is going to die in Gallia because of her being unable to help her. This angers Fate, so he slams the table, asking what she means by these words. She tells him that because of how nice she is one day, she will eventually fuel a new being, one that is the complete opposite of her. With Eris claiming that her death will guide the kingdom into a new age, she hopes that Roxy dies. This makes Fate even more enraged, so he leaves the bar without telling her another world, leaving her to lose one ally. Episode 10. Meanwhile, Roxy talks with the other Holy Knight, only to learn that one of their companions has gone missing in something called the Great Ravine. As this happens, Fate talks with Jade about getting a holder for his sword. Because he has no minerals to make them, he has no way of creating a holder that can suffice to his sword. Upon hearing this, Fate informs him that he will go collect the mineral himself, learning it's near the Great Ravine. After some time, he gets into Gallia and begins fighting monsters to pave his way to the ravine. While this happens, Roxy talks with her companions and learns that they have no clue on how to find the Great Ravine. With their compass not working, they are forced to figure it out themselves. This angers one of the girls, so she screams out in agony like a child. Roxy ignores her and tells her that if they follow the trail of orcs, then it will probably lead to the ravine, being as their lair is within the ravine. Fate, on the other, and sits around getting some rest after a long day of destiny monsters. While he rests his eyes, he wakes up to find the girl he killed earlier telling him something. With so much background noise, he is unable to hear what she is saying, but he soon understands. As he looks around, his surroundings become a pile of blood filled with monsters, making him realize she is grieving. After this, Hado comes by as well and pulls him into the depths of the blood pool. Then suddenly he wakes up from this dream, causing him to wonder what happened. He then notices a crowned beast nearby, so he decides to set out to go and ambush it. Although he can't see anything currently, thanks to a night vision skill, he is able to easily see them. Thanks to this, he switches to the bow mode and begins firing at the monsters. After his first strike, however, he realizes something else is going on. With all of the monsters rushing him despite getting injured, he knows this is unusual behavior. As he gets attacked, Roxy's party also encounters the same monsters. Instead of getting defeated easily, however, they get defeated easily, causing a majority of Roxy's party to fall. Thankfully, however, they aren't all useless with some of the warriors fighting back. Despite their powerful attacks, they get thrown to the ground as well, forcing Fate to step in. He takes one out with a single hit and moves on to the others, defeating them as well with ease. After seeing this display of power, they realize just how strong he really is, still thinking he is the warrior corpse. Roxy then thanks Fate for his help, claiming they all would have died without his help. Mugon, the captain of the unit, also thanks him and introduces the annoying girl Mina to him. Following this, the random Holy Knight introduces himself, but Fate ignores this bozo. Instead, he points at the monsters, revealing they were being controlled by someone this entire time. With all of them being crowned beasts, it seems a little too much of a coincidence for all of these monsters to randomly charge at them. He heads into the ravine with hopes of finding the mineral he has been looking for. It takes some time, but eventually he discovers various things like petrified monsters. This makes him realize there must be something in this cave possible of doing all of this, so he proceeds cautiously. As he looks for the mineral, he eventually stumbles upon Eris, looking off into the distance. She then runs off and loses Fate, making him ticked off. Although he lost her, he ends up finding a chimera standing before him. After further inspection, he finds no core within it, causing him to notice it's just a prototype. He inspects more of the land, and eventually finds more and more chimera, counting 3 in total. He wonders if Eris is behind all of this, but suddenly he is interrupted when a large explosion occurs nearby. He rushes to the scene knowing Roxy is in that area. While he does this, 3 chimeras attack Roxy's party, taking out Norther the Knight and Mugen the Captain. Now, with just 2 remaining members, she thinks all hope is lost. But just in the nick of time, Fate emerges before them to save the day yet again. Despite him sending in a powerful attack, the chimera begins regenerating. Upon noticing this, he informs Roxy of their weakness, telling her to strike them in the core. With this knowledge, they rush in confidently, knowing these chimeras are nothing compared to the ones he fought earlier. In a matter of seconds, he defeats the first one, leaving only 2 left. He then moves on to fighting the second one, where he notices Mina taking it on herself. Although she is screaming for help, she is putting up one heck of a fight, impressing him. Because of this, he offers to let him take over, making quick work of the chimera. He then moves on to the final one alongside Roxy, hoping to finally put an end to these incoming attacks. Right when he thinks it's about time he finishes things, the chimera jumps high in the air, thus forcing the ground to collapse as he lands. While they fall, Fate makes sure to grab hold of Roxy in order to protect her from the fall. After realizing this, she holds him tightly, causing the 2 to wake up later that night within the cave. When he wakes up, he notices his mask is off, and Roxy is lying on his lap. He looks around for it but can't find his mask anywhere, eventually noticing it under her leg. He quickly grabs it just in the nick of time to prevent her from noticing his true identity. As he talks, his eye turns red, causing him to run off in a panic. With his gluttony skill activating, he realizes the chimera is close by. Because of this, he runs after to fight it, making quick work of it with his scythe. After killing it, he notices the same emblem that was on the other monsters, causing him to realize someone is definitely after Roxy's head. He instantly thinks of Eris, claiming that she is surely the one behind it. After this, Roxy emerges before him, which causes an explosion to happen nearby. She explains that this is the mineral he has been looking for the entire time, making his trip worthwhile. He saves her and secures the material, then heads back to get back to business with Jade. Episode 11. Upon arriving back at town, Roxy decides to face off against Fate, claiming he has been charged on like 100 counts of violent acts. Roxy tells him that she can no longer look past these actions, claiming he can only save himself by joining the royal army. He denies her request, wanting to have some freedom, so she decides to go forward with the duel. She faces off against him and tells him to prepare himself, so he does. He decides not to draw his sword, making her wonder if he will be all right like this. Even with her concern, he is confident in his abilities, clashing swords with her head on. Instead of striking her, he decides to just block, hoping to assess her stat levels. Instantly, he gets pushed back, making him realize the difference in a true holy knight and someone like him. Eventually, she lands a hit on his mask, making him forced to take things seriously, knowing he will get his identity exposed if he doesn't fight back. She continues to incite him, eventually forcing Fate to reveal himself, using a holy knight skill despite him not being a holy knight. He explains that it's thanks to the minerals he gathered in the mines, making her wonder if he is a past holy knight. He explains that he is neither a knight or evildoer, but rather just a warrior. After saying his lines, he rushes her and pushes her back, making him think he won the duel. As he plans on finishing things, he notices a necklace on her neck with the gem he bought for her previously. Because he hesitates looking at this, she ends up landing a hit on him, knocking his sword out of his hand. Even after winning, she asks him why he didn't try his hardest. She then asks him if he learned to fight by Aaron, claiming she was also trained by him on her journey here. With his footwork looking similar to his, she realizes that the man who helped him slay the Lich Lord was him. Fate tells him even if it was him, then he still doesn't need to help her, so he leaves without another word. As he walks away, he wishes that he could help her, knowing she cares deeply for him, even after he left. Mugen then approaches and tells him he was great in the duel. While this happens, the mad scientists talk about the Veldrick siblings, mentioning the Philosopher's Stone. With the eldest of the siblings having achieved this, they reveal that this stone is able to heal any wound. It can also grant the user immense power in exchange for dominating their mind entirely. Essentially, it's mind control, making her wonder what his true objective with the stone is. That night, Fate thinks of when Mind told him to head to the domain of E, a place where the divine dragon is. With this dragon killing Roxy's father and making Gallia such a horrid place, he wonders if he will ever get that strong. As he thinks of what to do, the alarm for the town sounds, causing Northern to explain a stampede of monsters are attacking full speed. Numbering in the thousands, Roxy decides to assemble her army and strike back before they destroy the town. Fate also decides to check it out, noticing Roxy at the front lines of the battle with a sad face. He considers going in, but knows at her level she should easily be able to deal with these small fries. Instead, he decides to activate his half-starvation phase, allowing him to get a minor power boost. After doing so, he looks around and notices a huge monster traveling under the ground headed straight towards Roxy's party. A surprise attack would prove fatal to her army. Because of this, Fate decides to use Greed Bow form to fire a large arrow straight into the ground. After doing so, it forces the monster to come above ground, but he quickly notices something is up with it. Noticing it has the same symbol as the other monsters, he rushes into battle to defeat it and protect Roxy. Before he strikes it, he checks its stats and realizes they are all over 10 million. This knowledge forces him to move with caution, switching Greed to the shield form. It blocks the incoming attack, but he doesn't have long before it sends in another attack. To counter this, he decides to move back and fire his bow again, hoping to evaporate the monster entirely. After this attack, it disappears entirely, only for him to find it behind him. He realizes as it burrows down that it shifted itself into another form. While it does this, it also rushes towards Roxy's army, forcing him to get serious. He knows that these aren't the movements of a monster brain, so he decides to use his strongest skill, donating Greed 20% of his stats. He uses his strongest skill yet again, hoping that he will be able to explode the entire monster in one blow. Upon using it, the monster gets defeated, and he gains its powers, but somehow it still stands tall. He looks around wondering what happened, only to notice a masked man standing above him. He assumes it's Eris, so he rushes them without a second thought, knowing he is stronger. Once he gets close, however, Greed informs him that he has one of the mortal sin weapons, making it unlikely that Eris is the one behind these monsters. With this enemy having the ability to infinitely replicate these monsters, Greed tells him he is out of luck for this fight. Because of this, Fate decides to let him get consumed by the monsters, but thanks to his increased armor protection, he's able to withstand it entirely. In turn, it also takes the slime out, giving him yet another power boost. With this new power, he sends in another attack at the masked man, but it gets blocked entirely. After this happens, Greed informs him that he doesn't stand a chance against the man with him, never going to Domain E to gain stronger powers. Even after hearing this, he rushes him, but only gets taken out like Greed had told him was going to happen. On his knees, Fate realizes how much stronger this man is, so he resolves himself and unlocks an even stronger power, allowing his Gluttony skill to take over. With this causing him to go berserk, the masked man instantly realizes how the tide of the battle has shifted. When he is struck by Fate again, he is pushed back, causing him to go on the defensive. Fate doesn't stop here, however, continuing his attacks until he eventually knocks the mask off of the man's face. It reveals Northern the knight under the mask, but he explains he only has the right in figuring out his identity. He tells Fate he will soon understand, blowing his whistle, thus summoning the divine dragon to his steed. Although it looks like it's heading his way, in reality, the dragon is charging full speed towards Roxy's group. Despite this, Fate continues forward, not knowing that her party is already in a pickle. Eventually, the dragon arrives to find Roxy on the battlefield, but she doesn't back down. She faces it head-on, but after thinking about how her father died to it, she gets scared and falls to her knees. Per usual, fate emerges before her to save the day, taking the hit head-on. By doing so, it ends up shattering his mask, exposing his true identity to Roxy. Episode 12. After revealing himself to her, he decides to be a beast and smiles at her with his new non-peasant-like appearance. Immediately, she notices his red eyes and begins wondering if there is something wrong with him. Before she can ask, however, he orders her to leave as soon as she can, him needing to deal with the dragon. He then apologizes to her for lying to her this entire time, running off in the process. She tries to call out for him, but he doesn't respond, leaving her to watch as he faces off against the strongest monster imaginable. At the top of the dragon is Northern, controlling the dragon himself. Fate doesn't back down, however, using his Holy Knight's skill to hopefully inflict a fatal wound on it. With the initial attack causing it to be immobilized, he has a chance to rush Northern. Now, with it being a true 1-versus-1, the two begin trading hits, making Fate realize he is on the same level as he is. Northern explains to him that even though he is fighting alongside him for now, he still hasn't shown his true strength. With Fate being in the same boat, the two of them begin exerting more and more levels of power. Eventually, Northern finds an opening and rushes him, taking off one of Fate's arms. He claims the battle is over, raising his gun to deliver the final hit. He tells Fate it's over, but right before he lands it, Fate appears behind him and impales his chest. Fate reveals that he sacrificed his arm in order to create this opening, knowing he couldn't beat him without losing something. He then finishes him off, slicing the sword through the rest of his chest. After doing so, he wakes up to find the girl within the Chimera's core once again, this time with her speaking to him. She introduces herself as Luna, and thanks him for ending her off, claiming it was for the best. Despite this, she apologizes to him, explaining she can't help him anymore. After saying this, the ground below him shatters, making him realize the reason he has been able to control his gluttony skills is thanks to her. Now, with the barrier breaking, he will soon fall into the depths and cause him to go berserk. Right before he falls, Greed catches him, revealing his true form and informing Fate they need to go back now. Before he leaves, he thanks Luna for her help, but claims he has to defeat the dragon even if it will drive him to madness. Back in the present, Fate talks with Greed, deciding it's time to finally finish off the dragon, considering the barrier was broken. He then throws Greed full speed towards the dragon's neck, and follows this by using one of the hand-to-hand combat skills Aaron taught him. Despite this doing some real damage, Greed tells him he will remember this moment. Fate then checks the dragon's stat, and realizes they aren't too far off. With this giving him the confidence he needs, he jumps on top of it once again this time, knocking it to the ground. To follow this, he uses a skill consuming a part of his stats, but in return it slices the dragon in half, sealing it for good. After doing this, he obtains its stats, and his body begins to get driven into madness. He decides to restrain himself for the time being, knowing if he loses control, he will become a force even worse than the dragon. Because of this, he pours his stats into Greed, unlocking his final form. In turn, it resets all of his stats, making him think even if he goes berserk, he will still be able to get taken out by someone else. After this, he passes out, leaving Greed to look over him. Thankfully, Mine appears in the nick of time, emerging before Fate. She tells him it's time to fulfill her promise, making Fate realize his time is near. He tells her to kill him, knowing he has no other option. She then picks up her axe and swings downward towards Fate, but right before he is hit, Roxy jumps to the rescue. He asks her why she did this, causing her to question why he was even trying to be killed in the first place. He explains his situation to her, informing her he needs to die. Despite hearing this, she tells him that he needs to calm down, claiming she will still like him even if he is stronger than anyone. After hearing this, he reverts back to normal and takes her hand, thus allowing him to regain his senses. He thanks her for this, and finally understands that he should have relied on her this entire time. Mine watches this go down and decides to walk away, allowing her to take care of him instead of ending his life. When Fate wakes up, he finds himself in an unfamiliar room with his arm still cut off. He decides to look out the window and notices it's already past noon. He wonders what's going on, but soon after, Eris and Mine enter his room. They tell him he slept too long, handing him Greed in the process. Fate notices Greed in shambles, so he asks what happened. Apparently, a monster found Greed and carried him halfway across Gallia. Eris then asks Fate for her help, making him wonder what his true purpose is for having one of the mortal sin skills. Before she assists him, however, she informs him that she will heal his arm. While this happens, Mira and Mugen duel against each other until Roxy emerges before them. They end the duel immediately and chase after her, learning that she is going to see Fate. With it being a week since he fell asleep, Roxy thinks it will be just another day of him being asleep. When she enters today, however, she realizes that he is gone, causing her to become concerned. She looks around and finds a note left by him, explaining he is sorry for hiding his gluttony skill. On top of this, he thanks her, informing her he will one day come back to her. Meanwhile, the eldest Veldrick sibling locks himself in his room, thanking fate for killing Hado. He laughs menacingly, showing he has become under the Philosopher's Stone's mind control powers. Fate, on the other hand, regains some stats, then uses them all to regain his lost arm. With this being done, the others leave, allowing him to continue fighting on his own, thus regaining his former power. Roxy, on the contrary, gets back to the capital with the good news of the dragon being dead.